If you've seen my video on it, then you'd know that The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is my favourite game of all time, and the Zelda series as a whole is one of my favourite franchises of all time as well, only really being rivaled by Silent Hill, Resident Evil and the Metal Gear Solid franchises. And also, if you've seen the Majora's Mask video, you'd know it's a little bit poopy. But that's something I'm going to rectify soon. Today, we'll be talking about The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. This is the fourth and final request I've had so far to review a game, and this one comes from a friend of mine called Rotten Nana. Rotten Nana is, like me, a massive Zelda fan, and Wind Waker is their favourite Zelda game, and for good reason. Now, my review of Majora's Mask wasn't exactly the best video I've ever put out, and really I'm still trying to find my style even all these videos later. But today I'm going to try something even more unusual for this channel, and I'm going to try and structure this review a little bit more sensibly instead of making it up as I go along like I usually do. So I'll be splitting this review up into different sections like history or gameplay, so it's easier for you to follow along with, and it's easier for me to articulate any points that I'm trying to get across to you. I'd also like to go on record to say that none of the footage you're going to be seeing in this review is my own, as I don't currently have a way of recording gameplay footage off of a GameCube at this moment in time. So I'd like to give a massive shout out and thank you to PackAttack04082 and Beardbear for allowing me to use their footage in this review, and you can find links down below to their channels and their playlists that I borrowed the footage from. Once again, massive thank you to PackAttack and Beardbear, and let's just crack on. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Back in the long ancient past of the year 2000, at Space World 2000, Nintendo blessed the world with a tech demo for the up-and-coming Nintendo GameCube. The demo showed a rather impressive scene of a more realistic looking Link and Ganondorf going mano a mano in a dimly lit hall of some sort. This got the fans excited. They were chomping at the bit to get their grubby little mitts on a new Zelda game that was grittier, darker and more realistic in setting. Fans would have to patiently wait until Space World 2001 when Nintendo decided to show a short demo clip of their next entry in the Zelda series, Zelda no Densetsu, Kaze no Takuto, or as the rest of the world will come to know it, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Fan reaction was passionate to say the least. Divided would be the correct term. Some of the fans loved this new art style and likened it to a playable cartoon and said it was super approachable aesthetically for any and all ages. The rest of the fan base hated the art style, saying it was too immature, too childlike and too cartoony. It's not what they were expecting. Most of the fan base felt betrayed and cried bloody murder, saying that the tech demo from the year previous was misleading and false advertisement for a game that they thought they were gonna get. But December 2002 finally rolled around, marking the release of the game in Japan, and over the next several months releasing globally to the rest of the world. But we finally got our hands on this heretic title, going in expecting to hate it purely on the visuals alone. And the general consensus from around the world was... What's in Wind Waker?
Damn! That shit good!
Fans around the world love this game in spite of the divisiveness behind the cel-shaded art style. Metacritic has this game pegged at a 96 out of 100, and Famitsu magazine gave this game a perfect score, making it the fourth title in the magazine's history at that point to receive such high honours. Nintendo Power, GamePro, Planet GameCube and many other outlets gave this game a perfect score. Wind Waker hit the ground running and didn't show any signs of losing momentum anytime soon, as it travelled the world winning the hearts and wallets of many, many fans. It racked up a grand total of 4.6 million copies sold, less than half of that of Ocarina of Time, yes, but those numbers still ain't no slouch. And the HD collection that came out 10 years later added an additional 2.3 million to the count, totaling 6.3 million copies sold in all. The game wasn't without criticism though, but that's coming up a little bit later on. My own personal experience with The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker came around in about 2004-2005-ish. We bought the bundle copy second hand and it was wrongly packaged with the collector's edition disc instead of the Ocarina of Time Master Quest disc. This did confuse me at first, but I wasn't going to complain. Instead of just getting one game and a new variation, I got like 4 new games. The only reason I caught onto this as well is because the collector's edition disc actually comes with a 20-minute playable demo for Wind Waker, and that's when I realised, because why was I getting a 20-minute playable demo on an additional disc for the game that I already owned? I still have that same collector's edition disc from all those years ago, but I don't have the case for it right now. And I actually had to borrow a copy of Wind Waker as well as borrow the footage from someone else as well. So far I'm 0 for 2. I loved every second of replaying this game. I liked some parts a little less, and I tolerated other parts, but for the most part, this was an absolute joy to replay. But let's go over some of the plot first. We open to a foreboding musical score as a tapestry recounts the legend of how a young hero once saved the ancient land of Hyrule from a great evil. One day, this young hero mysteriously disappears, and years later, that great evil arises once again. With no hero to defend the land, the gods, as a last resort, instruct the people to retreat to the highest mountain peaks before flooding Hyrule, sinking it beneath the waves of the Great Ocean. Flash forward 100 years later, and we meet our hero Link sound asleep in a lookout on his home island, Outset Island. After being woke up by his younger sister Aryll, it turns out it's Link's birthday and he's finally hit the same age as the hero of time when he went out on his adventure 100 years prior. His grandmother, who is Link's only other relative and a treasure that must be protected at all costs, she gifts Link the hero's clothes and sets him about his day. After using the spyglass Aryll gave him as a birthday gift, Link sees a gargantuan bird holding a young girl being pursued by a pirate ship, firing its cannons at the bird in an attempt to rescue said girl. The bird is struck by a cannonball and drops her into a forest atop the cliffs of Outset. Seeing this, Link rushes off to the Swordmaster Orca to retrieve the hero sword and scales the cliffs, entering the forest to save the girl. Here, he's confronted by bokoblins who have set their sights on the girl, who is currently suspended unconscious from a tree branch. After dispatching the enemies, the girl falls from the branch moments after waking up, and a random panicked guy then appears at the entrance of the forest, naming her as Miss Tetra. This helps make the obvious connection that she and the guy are actually from the pirate ship that was chasing the giant bird. Without even a thanks, they leave the forest. Here they're greeted by Aryll and the return of the giant bird, who snatches her up and flies off. Link, not even thinking, in a blind rage rushes after the bird, falling off the cliff towards the rocks below, only to be saved by Tetra at the last second. Link then asks Tetra if he can go aboard her ship in an attempt to save his sister. She begrudgingly agrees on the grounds that he finds a shield to protect himself with. It's from this that we're then confronted with a truly heartbreaking scene of Link's grandmother, oblivious to the events going on, in an obvious state of upset, wondering where her granddaughter's gone. After Link goes to find the shield mounted on the wall upstairs, he finds it to be missing, being held onto by his grandmother, who tells him that it's believed this shield was actually used by the hero of time himself 100 years ago. Link says his goodbyes, well, I assume he does anyway, and sets off with Tetra to find his sister. Everyone knows that the Legend of Zelda games are all about exploration and discovery, as that's the foundation Miyamoto laid for the series back in '86 with the original Zelda game. An open world, go where you want, do what you want, discover the mysteries of the land kind of game. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that until Breath of the Wild, Wind Waker actually had the best sense of discovery and exploration, bar none, in the franchise. And while every other game did have a good sense of discovery and exploration with secrets and hidden things for you to discover and do, ultimately it came down to you running or riding across that game's field, Hyrule Field, Termina, Holodrum, Labrina or Koholint Island. And it's not a knock either, you don't fix what ain't broke, but Wind Waker offered more than that. Wind Waker offered you an opportunity to go on high seas adventures, to venture off and sail through uncharted waters, and to discover lands man hasn't stepped foot on in centuries. You can salvage and plunder loot on the sea floor. You can even board an enemy submarine and really ruin the day of everyone aboard. The general setup of this game follows traditional structures previous games have had before. It's 3 pearls instead of sacred stones or pendants. The several Triforce pieces are similar to Ocarina's medallions or the maidens from Link to the Past. It's even a callback to the original Zelda game and how you collect Triforce shards in that game. And it's another not broke don't fix it situation. And it works for the most part. The world map has been uprooted for a more thematically appropriate sea chart that further adds to the feeling of discovery, as it only fills in once you feed a fishman in the area who then fills in that region of your map. This means 49 islands for you to unearth and explore, and each island is unique to themselves. They can either have a new upgrade, or a settlement, or a puzzle, or tingle. But as I mentioned at the start, the land of Hyrule was flooded and turned into the Great Sea. The distance between each island is vast, and you can't just swim from place to place. Well, you can if you pause buffer a bunch to store up speed, but if you don't align your shot properly, then you can... Sorry, my speedrunner was showing. Sailing. If you've heard of Wind Waker, then you're probably aware of the mechanic that was more divisive than the art style itself. Going from island to island can take a hefty chunk of time, and this is where the fanbase gets truly divided into one of 3 camps. You either love it and say it helps break up the tension of the quest, it helps to relax the mind and calm yourself down. And as a rare moment in video games, you're just asked to absorb instead of destroy. Or you hate it, and aside from learning speedrunning tactics, you have no other option but to deal with it and complain in forums to people who really don't care. And then there's the fence sitters who just accept it and live in this morally grey world where even the refreshing taste of orange juice just tastes like the unending march towards death. Personally, I love the sailing in Wind Waker. It's more than just going from A to B. It's another chance of discovery and exploration while you're sailing the seas. You might come across a lone bokoblin adrift on a makeshift raft. You might end up fighting for your life against a giant Octorok while a whirlpool slowly reels you in. You might even fight an angry cyclone god and then become best mates with him, unlocking a pseudo quick travel. The only real pain in the arse is that every few minutes you have to control the wind and change its direction so you can keep top speed while you're sailing. Yes, I did say control the wind, and no, I didn't stutter. Link carries the power of a god on his hip at all times, a magical conductor's baton called, shock horror, the Wind Waker. Being able to, on a whim, change the direction of the winds, summon cyclones, and how does mind control sound for you? This Link stands to be the most destructive and a potential world-ending threat with this power at his fingertips. If you're wondering what I mean by that, I would suggest going to watch the Science of Wind Waker video where Austin breaks down why even changing the wind once can be truly catastrophic, especially if you're just doing it to get places faster. Aside from the Wind Waker, the rest of your inventory is the standard array of bombs, a bow, bottles, the iron boots and the boomerang maker return as well. But now we also have things like the bait bag, the spoils bag, the grappling hook, later replaced by the hook shot, a skull hammer which is sick, and a Deku leaf for gliding. Don't worry about the mailbag, it's just kind of there to feel involved. Now, to be fair, in the HD edition, they did fix the need for the constant wind shifting by introducing the Swift Sail, which is winnable at the Windfall Island auction. In fact, Wind Waker HD actually fixed a bunch of issues fans had with the original game from 2002. The Swift Sail made sailing more tolerable for the non-believers, and the part I mentioned earlier that didn't quite match the structure of the older games, the infamous Triforce hunt, was streamlined, removing the tedious need to take each of the 8 Triforce charts to Tingle, pay an extortionate sum of money to translate, and then go to get the shard. Many people, including myself, hated how tedious and drawn out this part was, so the HD remake streamlined this and only required you to translate 3 charts, and the other 5 shards are available to get whenever you felt like. And the Picto Box got an upgrade as well. You can now take selfies. Useful. Now the bosses are something I'm only going to briefly touch on because while they're all visually distinct from each other and are very interesting to look at, there's not much going on for them that's any different from previous Zelda games. It usually boils down to a 3-step process. Step number 1 is figuring out how to use that dungeon's item against the boss. Step number 2 is using the item against the boss. And step number 3 is hit the boss until it dies. Rinse and repeat. Item, assault, profit. And this isn't the end of the world, as it has been the norm in Zelda games for more or less forever, but these bosses aren't that memorable for me, with the exception of maybe Puppet Ganon and Ganondorf himself. It's always confused me how people could hate this art style. I get that it doesn't match some people's personal aesthetic, but there were some people who hated this art style simply because it wasn't the more realistic style from the 2000s tech demo. Wind Waker uses an art style everyone is familiar with, cell shading. And this was probably the best art style they could have chosen for a game like this. The use of colour, when combined with the Wind Waker HD's new lighting, even 7 years later, is still incredible to look at. The deep sapphire blues of the ocean really help Link and his boat, the King of Red Lions, stand out against the endless oceans and islands. And the colour scheme of Link's greens against the King of Red Lions, well, reds, are intentional, as green and red on the colour wheel are opposite to each other. They're contrasting colours, which means when they're next to each other, they help each other stand out more. Sunsets in this game are gorgeous to look at, with the saturated oranges giving way to the deep pinks and purples of the coming night. Sunrise washes the waters and lands with a cool blue and really help with that cold morning feeling. When it rains, it's miserable, cold and gloomy with greys and whites and muted blues. And the forest with the deep greens and browns really helps sell the damp and humid climate inside the forest haven and the dark forest. The colour choices Wind Waker employs are masterfully done and really drive home and cement the feeling and themes of each area you visit. Even the character models hold up really well today in their own special way. I've always really liked the bizarre proportions some of these characters have, like Gonzo, who has a big burly chest and massive arms, but then teeny weeny little noodles for legs. In fact, I don't think a single character in this game is normal in the traditional sense. They all have something about them that's exaggerated: stubby legs, massive hair, bug eyes. It's fun and it really helps them stand out. No NPC feels the same, visually at least, from any other. Tetra's look isn't exactly what I'd call iconic. It has more of a cabin boy feel to it than the air of a pirate captain. But this is definitely her look and she owns it. The dagger she's got on her hip is a really nice touch, and that weird physics-defying bun she's got on top of her head is just adorably weird. The real shame for me here is when it's later revealed that Tetra is actually Zelda and she changes into her princess getup. There's nothing wrong with this look, it's just more of a character thing at this point. As soon as she realises who she is, she just kind of resigns to it and becomes real mopey and flat as a character, as opposed to her lively, rough and tumble Tetra self. Link, on the other hand, is a winner through and through with his design for this game. Keeping his traditional green tunic and green cap from other previous incarnations, there are some welcome changes here. His tunic now has 2 shades to it, thanks to a lighter green undershirt underneath his tunic proper. And I much prefer this over the white overall underwear Link wore in the Ocarina of Time. And I much prefer it from the brown sleeves he had in Zelda 1 and 2. He keeps the white leggings, and the tan boots don't really add or take away from the character design. They keep it grounded and more consistent to the iconic looks he's had beforehand. Link's hair is a crisp golden blonde which sits atop the face of the most emotive Link we've ever had thus far. Link's face matches his moods: suspicious face, angry face, scared face. He even looks around the environments with his eyes glancing about and landing on important items. This design Link has in Wind Waker is easily in my top 3 designs for Link, only being beaten out by Breath of the Wild's Blue Champion tunic look and Twilight Princess's design, which is just my overall favourite look for Link. This design's been dubbed the Toon Link look, and rightfully so with its cel-shaded art style. This is probably the most visually distinct look we've had for Link ever since the switch up came about with Breath of the Wild and Link changing his outfit. This was a really good way of bringing in a look everyone was familiar with previous Zelda games and matching it to that game's art style and really making it work for itself. This is design done right. So after gathering the pearls, climbing the Tower of the Gods, mind controlling your friends to fix your sword, and finding out your boat is actually a king, Link now battles his way through Ganon's tower in a now reawakened kingdom of Hyrule deep beneath the waves. Link finally confronts Ganondorf atop the tower, who seems almost nostalgic. He tells Link that in his home of the Gerudo Desert, there was never really a break from the elements, how the winds ushered in the suffering of his people, scorching winds bringing in the heat of the dry desert air during the day, and the arctic bone-chilling snap of the cold night air. Ganondorf here makes it sound like his conquest of Hyrule was more for the betterment of his own people rather than his own personal lust for power. He wanted the suffering to stop, no matter the cost. This is the most human we've seen Ganondorf in a game up till this point. I don't think a game after has even humanized him as well as has been done here. We don't even fight a beast version of him in this game either. The closest we get is the Phantom Ganon on the Return to the Fortress, or the Puppet Ganon fight we have just before this. But the King of Red Lions, failing to read the room, wishes Hyrule to be flooded for good, forever washing away the past and mistakes of their kingdom before, wiping the slate clean in the hopes of building a new Hyrule and restoring the Hylian people. I think it's fair to say here that this fight is rather an emotional battle. For Link, this is the guy who kidnapped his sister. Oh, Link does save his sister, by the way. This is the man who kidnapped Link's sister and caused his grandmother to suffer to the point of illness. This is the man for the moblins and bokoblins tormenting sailors on the seas. This is Link's legacy. This is his heritage, his curse, knowingly or otherwise. And for Ganondorf, regardless of his reasons, he is literally watching the walls of his world crash around him. He is watching all he fought for drown under the brine and silt of the Great Ocean. This was the last straw for him, his final stand. He is angry, and this shows in his fight. Ganondorf assaults Link in a flurry of blows and flying strikes, putting pressure on the player, leading to the only real boss fight in the game that requires some skill over purely exploiting a weakness with an item. Eventually, Zelda joins in with the plan of reflecting a light arrow off of Link's shield to incapacitate Ganondorf long enough to deal some damage. And it works. During the battle, Link is flung high into the air, and on his way back down, driving his entire weight behind the Master Sword, piercing Ganon's skull, who is now slowly turning to stone, doomed to become a centerpiece and watch over the now flooded and washed away lands that he so desperately fought to rule over. Link and Tetra are whisked away in bubbles, leaving behind the King of Red Lions, who as it turns out was the last king of Hyrule before it flooded. Leaving him behind means leaving behind the final remnants of the old kingdom, leaving Link and Zelda, who's now returned to the name Tetra, to sail off in search of a new land fit for the birth of New Hyrule. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker has a lot more going for it than people give it credit for. Especially at first glance when they see the art style or they hear the music and write it off as a kid's game. But it's the story behind it all, how the NPCs all have their own struggles to deal with. Some are trying to live up to a legacy left behind by a mentor, while at the same time trying to comfort a person who's just lost their mother. This being both Medley and Prince Kamali. Some are trying to atone for the sins of the past in The King of Red Lions. And for Link, it's a personal journey at first to save his family, to save his sister, but then it becomes a moral obligation to save the rest of the world, putting an immense amount of pressure on such a young boy. the colours and the art style are not representative of the final package you'll be getting if you play this game. This game is deceptively deep. And that's why so many people, even the haters turned fans, realised that this game is going to go down as a true legend. Not just in Zelda history, but in video game history as well. Hello, and welcome to the end of the video. I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible because I did all of that video in one go, and my throat is killing me. Yes, I've changed the look of this again. This will more than likely be the final look, like the final setup I've got going on for now. There's probably going to be a few decorative changes along here and behind me, but I think this is it for now. I've got the new camera as well, which hopefully marks an improvement for the channel as well. Just a quick few thank yous. Obviously, thank you to Rotten Nana for suggesting playing this game. I have always loved this game, and revisiting it is never a task or a chore. Also, thank you to Packatag and Beard Bear for allowing me to use their footage. I hope this video did your footage some justice. But that's all from me for now. I will see you in the next video. I'm not going to do the high pitch. Bye.